Coming to you from Salt Lake City, Utah, we are the Outcasts in Zion. I'm your host, Christian.
And I'm your co-host, Richard.
Outcasts in Zion is a religious discussion program focusing on opening friendly lines of communication between atheists and believers.
We are also available on outcastinzion.com, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We encourage atheists and believers to join us in the discussion. We also appreciate any news and information you might want to share with us at outcastinzion@gmail.com.
And this is episode number...
Okay, it's on, and you can go whenever.
Welcome back. I'm still your host, Christian, and this is still your co-host, Richard. And today we're going to be going over your history, your background, and where you stand on the issue, religion, and so forth. So, go ahead, please.
All right. Well, religiously, I fall definitely into the atheist category at this point. I feel like my, road to atheism is a little more boring because of the fact that I've been agnostic since I was at least 12, and it was only in the last few years that you ended up pointing it out to me, and I really saw atheism as like this actual possibility. I never really thought about it before, which is odd because in my family, my father's actually atheist. I had a stepfather that was also atheist, and a whole slew of stepbrothers that were atheists, and somehow I was still in this agnostic camp without recognizing like why they were atheists or how they got to that point. My mother raised me Catholic, and so I went to Sunday school and all those kinds of things for a great deal of time between the ages of like 6 and 10. And when my family got divorced and my mom went away, church became a complete non-factor. And and so that was it. But I still remember right before I got out of Sunday school and things of that nature, just even at 10, laughing at myself at the fact that we were reading these books and like coloring books for Jesus basically. And and there was like I still remember in my brain this image of Jesus like giving bread and like turning water into wine and things of that nature, and just sitting there going basically calling bullshit. Hopefully that swear is acceptable for you.
I don't think it's going to be.
It was just, I had this realization of like, why are we like, it felt like we were playing make-believe. Like even in Sunday school, it was like we were pretending something, because there was no part of my brain that could accept the idea that there was this guy that, was magical. Because even I saw David Copperfield cut a lady in half, and 5 minutes later she's fine. But I actually saw that when I was like 10 or so in that same area, and I freaked out when I saw that, because I'm just like, oh my god, he just killed this woman on stage. But
why has no one reacted to the fact that he just killed this woman on stage?
My dad's like, no, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, and then they put her back together and it was okay, but
that's funny.
That still freaked me out a lot more than the idea that Jesus, because at least I was seeing that live. But from there, my path was interesting because of the fact that I actually had a lot of very LDS friends, and I actually made a kind of a concerted effort to have Mormon friends and hang out with Mormon friends, because my family life was in a little bit in turmoil. And I saw these other kind of LDS families that were really fairly well put together, or so they seemed to be. I later learned that they're not. They're just as messed up as my family. But because of that, I did associate with a lot of LDS people. And so I had a lot of the religious discussions earlier in my life. And I remember, like somewhere in like my 14 kind of area, where I would have these discussions with people and ask them about evolution. Even then I believed in it, and they would give these arguments of like, oh no, it can't be this and it can't be that, and it was just never clear to me how they couldn't accept the fact that like the evidence was there for the chromosome that fused and from ape to man and all that stuff, and you hear the crap arguments of why are there still monkeys, and you know, and then it's just you don't understand evolution. Which at 14, I don't know how I knew that, but these guys didn't, and I think it's because, you know, they had their every week they're being bludgeoned with information that that's not true,
Right.
and this is the true church, and this is that the other thing, and you know, it's just fascinating. But some of the things that really started to show the writing on the wall as far as religion went was like I had a friend that, you know, we were like I think 13, 14 in that area, and he was just distraught about the fact that that he masturbated.
Yeah.
You know, and he was wholly terrified of it. He would talk to his bishop all the time about how horrible he was and why he couldn't stop himself from doing it and all this kind of thing. And you know, and he's asking me like, "Well, do you do it?" And I'm like, "Of course."
Right.
Like,
I'm a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah,
mean?
I don't care. But it was just so sad to see like the confusion in him, where he's like, "Well, how is it possible that you don't like have this guilt or like feel like that's bad?" And
So he was really agonizing over the fact that that not only that he was doing it, but that he even wanted to do it. It sounds like.
Yeah, right. And he had the bishop would have the Mormon missionaries come by his house like every week and like check on him and check on how he's doing with that.
Right.
And then the same issue with like tithing. They had Mormon missionaries coming to ask him why he hadn't paid his tithing. He's like 14. He had like summer jobs.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Why aren't you paying your tithing?" Like they were very on this particular family, and which I didn't understand. And you know, their family already had all sorts of problems. I believe that his father had some sort of immunodeficiency disease, not AIDS, but like lupus or something of that nature. And so he was like living elsewhere for his medical care and things like that, trying to support for the family. But meanwhile, they're just kind of crumbling.
Right.
And it was another one of those things where I'm like, how can these people who are just so dedicated and they're trying so hard to be fervent in the religion and things of that nature, and they're still just being like punished, and they're having like all these horrible things happen to them, like no one's looking out for them.
Right.
And you know, and that's where I really started to, you know, I was already agnostic. My version of agnostics pretty much from the age of 12 was this idea that basically I could get back to God probably was something that sparked the Big Bang, not even an entity of any kind, but something magical that started the Big Bang. That's where I was from the ages of 12 till 27.
Right.
And all my arguments would stem off that. And so my path through religion and religious discussions was always about basically trying to say, like, why are you part of this religion? Like, because all I could see is these religions that either try and control the people in that religion or divide those people from everyone else.
Right.
And you know, and that was just the hard thing for me to always deal with all of my friends and even within my family, was that, you know, there's just this extra layer of basically hatred just because one person was labeled A and one person was labeled B. I mean, my grandmother like basically disowned me and like tried to have me excommunicated, and I think officially I was excommunicated
by the Catholic Church.
By the Catholic Church, because I defended my Mormon friends to my very Irish Catholic grandmother, and the next thing I know, you know, she is, you know, like, well, we had a huge fight about it, but I think she ended up calling like my Monsignor at the time, which is you know, who my pastor was.
Right.
And I don't know how all that rolled out. That was so long ago, and I haven't cared since. So who gives a shit? But she was sitting there, you know, calling my friend like in the car. He's in the car with us.
Yeah.
And she's saying like, you're part of a cult and you're gonna burn in hell eternally.
Right.
She's telling this to my friend.
Right.
And I'm just like, how could you possibly say this to another human being? Like, well, how could you? And I mean, he's my age. He's like 12.
Right.
I'm telling this 12-year-old that he's, you know, crazy for basically believing what his family believes.
Right.
You know, and so I never understood that. There were parts of the religion that I recall enjoying, you know, back when I did go, and I think the thing I liked about Catholicism was like the communion and kind of the ceremony to it.
Yeah.
The crackers, and we had the old school where they actually had like a goblet of like, I don't even know if it was non-alcoholic wine or whatever, but
we had that too. We probably
take
had
a sip
wine
of it. I think it did, if I remember correctly. But I enjoyed the ceremony of that. I think that was the only thing that kind of kept me thinking that there was something to it. And so even for a long time when people be like, well, if you had to choose a religion, what would you choose? And I was always like, well, Catholic, because I later realized, just because that's what I was raised in.
Right.
And so now, of course, I'm like, screw that. I would never choose a side at this point unless...
Well, and I think we've had that discussion before, and I've told you that I like, if I had to pick something to be true, I like Viking heaven, because in Viking heaven, you get to fight all day, and then you get to go to the ale house at night, and you get to have the huge meal, and people bring you beer, basically, and then the next day you get to go fight again. Like, I had a friend who was telling me there's a Caribbean god, though, who will give you a goat and all the coconuts you can carry. That also sounds like a pretty good deal.
Well, I think the spaghetti monster one is definitely the what is
that one?
I think it has a beer volcano and a stripper factory. And
I guess that's pretty good.
I think the version of hell is like the beer is stale and the strippers all have like venereal diseases.
No.
But you still get your beer and women. It's just not as good.
It's just not as good.
So either way, you can't lose there. The Pascal's wager is not so bad.
That's true.
In that scenario. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of say anything, special about how I was. I mean, I think the interesting part, I guess, is really actually more my mother throughout the years, like, as she faded away from Catholicism, she went into kind of a New Agey thing.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, the New Agey thing became that she was partially clairvoyant, and she could like read rings and like the story of their history and things of that nature. And then later she even became a medium and she actually, would clean houses, like poltergeist and stuff.
Right.
And that was another big writing on the wall about how completely bullshit all of this is.
Why specifically? Why did that jump out to you? Was it because she was getting paid to clean houses?
No, it was
spirits. Or
it was because of the fact that I know my mother, and I know this isn't true. I know that she's essentially lying to herself.
Right.
And so like to see the delusion.
So you think she's convinced herself? She's not.
I do because I know the things that she tells me. I know they're not true. I mean, we had a lot of deaths in the family, and when I was 16, I had a brother die in a helicopter crash. And for years, I would see his face like driving, and I would she believed that he was in the house all the time, and I would see him. I would see ghosts of my brother Dan in the house.
Right.
And I believed it as fervently as, even though I was agnostic and I had no God.
Right.
I did believe in spirits and things because of like these deaths in the family.
Right.
And then a couple years later, I totally was realizing that I was talking myself into it. That I was talking myself into he was there and all this stuff. And, and I finally let go of that and how kind of foolhardy it was. But then my stepfather and another one of my brothers died in a second helicopter crash. And to watch, like, my mother and how, she would hear a helicopter. And she'd be like, "Oh, it's James. He's passing over us, and this."
Not possibly that there was just a helicopter.
But you could see other helicopters. I mean, but no, it was James.
Right.
And the day that he died, she saw like a butterfly in the garden before we got the phone call that he was dead. And so for years, every butterfly was James, and it was just this realization that this was her way of protecting herself from like that pain.
Right.
And that's